Ethical Considerations and Warnings. A course about hacking would be irresponsibly incomplete without a chapter giving you a fair warning on the consequences of misusing these techniques as well as the ethical considerations of hacking. To begin this discussion, you need to be familiar with two different terminologies that describe different types of hackers, black hat and white hat. I like the imagery these terms bring to mind, because they always seem to remind me of spy versus spy. Black hat hackers are what most people typically think of when they hear the word hacker. A black hat hacker is the type of nefarious internet user who exploits weaknesses in computing systems for personal gain or in order to disrupt an organization's information systems to cause them harm. He's the guy wearing a high-collared shirt, sunglasses, and a fedora behind an array of 20 or so computer monitors, or the nerd in the movies who can break into a top-secret system illegally. There really isn't any good that can come out of adopting a black hat approach to hacking, either. When you hear in the media that a financial institution just lost thousands of usernames and passwords, or that a social media database was compromised that caused vast amounts of people to lose sensitive personal information, the attack was carried out by a black hat hacker. Recently, there was even a module of code contained in a WordPress plugin that was susceptible to an XSS vulnerability, a type of security flaw in websites with caching plugins, that was being exploited worldwide by the extremist group ISIS. If you are reading this book because you have dreams of causing mass disruption and chaos, I would highly advise you to reconsider. However, understand that security and penetration tools aren't inherently good or evil. One could argue that they are much like firearms in the sense that the weapon is an inanimate object and it is only as good or evil as the person wielding it. White hat hackers, on the other hand, are the complete opposite. They're the good guys who do everything in their power to find potential security flaws and correct the errors so the black hat hackers can't break a system. As you read this book, you need to consider all of the tools and techniques I show you from the perspective of a white hat hacker and use them responsibly. If you pursue white hat hacking professionally, you can add tremendous value to the organization you work for and make big money doing so. Some white hat hackers that have the Certified Ethical Hacker certification make salaries well into the six-figure range. Internet security is only becoming more important with each passing year, and a talented white hat hacker can use penetration testing tools and footprinting methods to identify disastrous security flaws on the organization's network and information infrastructure and patch them before they become a problem that would cost the organization obscene amounts of money. Furthermore, you need to be aware of the consequences of misusing the knowledge you learn in this book. Though you likely won't get caught snooping around a network attached to an unsecured SOHO, small office, home office, wireless network in your neighborhood or at your favorite local coffee shop, you need to respect other people's rights to privacy. Think about it. How would you feel if you were sitting down for a cup of coffee while reading a book only to find out later that someone had attacked your Kindle over the coffee shop's network and stole your data? You would feel enraged, irritated, and violated. So, remember the golden rule as you grow into a white hat hacker. Also consider that using penetration tools on networks where you don't have any authority to do so could lead to some extremely negative consequences. Let's Face it, you don't have the right to steal other people's personal information. It's illegal. Not only could you provoke civil lawsuits, but you could even face jail or prison time depending on the nature of your offense. If you choose to do it on your employer's network and you get caught, the best case scenario is that you would have some extremely uncomfortable questions to answer, and the worst case scenario is that you would become fired. It's just not worth it, so keep that in mind moving forward. Instead of testing out these techniques on public or corporate networks, my advice would be to try these in your very own home. Even a small home network will provide a digital playground for you to test out your new security skills. All you would need to run through some of these demos would be a personal computer, a wireless router, and preferably a few other devices that you can attach to your network. In the footprinting section, I will show you how to run ping sweeps and other utilities to perform reconnaissance and information gathering methods, so having several other devices will give you more toys to play with on your local area network, LAN. By now I hope you understand that the word hacker is rather ambiguous. Years ago, it rightfully meant a black hat hacker. Today, however, it could refer to any number of different types of people who are extremely knowledgeable about technology, and the term hacker doesn't necessarily mean someone who is trying to steal intellectual property or break into a restricted network. Calling someone a hacker is the layman's approach to describing a digital thief, but security professionals will often draw the line between the white hats and the black hats. With all of the dire warnings out of the way, we can now proceed to the juicer and more pragmatic sections of the book you have all been waiting for, and we can begin to learn how you personally can get your feet wet with hacking. To begin, understand that this book is written with the assumption that you have little to no understanding of rudimentary networking and security concepts. Because this book is written for beginners as opposed to seasoned internet security professionals and expert hackers, you need to first have a basic understanding of network terminology, addressing concepts, and other fundamentals that you will be able to use as a foundation to build your hacking skills upon. So, let's get started. Networking fundamentals. Understanding the ISA model and networking terminology. The ISA model, Open Systems Interconnection, is one of the best places to begin if you are lacking a working knowledge of networking concepts. Just about every one of the demos we will run through together is heavily based on the ISA model, and network security professionals often throw around terminology and jargon related to different components of this model. Also, it will benefit you personally if you understand what level of the ISA model various attacks target, and this knowledge is fundamental to understanding IP addresses and ports, which we will cover later in this chapter. To begin, understand that the ISA model consists of 7 different layers as follows. 7. Application, a computer application that creates data such as an email or instant messaging program. 6. Presentation, the method of encoding data, such as ASCII text. 5. Session, TCP ports, FTP, POP, HTTP, HTTPS, etc. 4. Transport, TCP or UDP connections, among others. 3. Network, IP addresses and packets. 2. Data link, MAC addresses and frames. 1. Physical, ones and zeros, bits, transmitted across a cable. Note, If you don't understand some of the terminology described above, take a deep breath and relax. We'll get to that later. I realize that this list may look odd because it starts with the number 7, but the first layer of the model is always represented on the bottom since each additional layer is dependent on its subordinate layer to encapsulate and transmit data. You can remember the first letter of each layer with the mnemonic. Please do not throw sausage pizza away. We won't go into great detail about the finer points of this model as we will really mainly be concerned with layers 2, 3, 4, and 5 from a hacking perspective, but you need a high-level understanding of the ASA model regardless. Each layer has its own specific function to facilitate data transmissions between two remote systems. As data, like the text in an instant messaging application, is generated on one device, it starts at the top of the ASA model in the application layer and gets pushed down through each subordinate layer until it becomes zeros and ones on a cable at the physical layer. Each layer encapsulates data for transmission before sending it onto the next layer for further encapsulation. The process works much like Russian nesting dolls. Once the data has reached the physical layer, it gets transmitted as binary bits over a cable medium. Then, the receiving host unpacks the encapsulated data from each layer using the reverse process. This model is fundamental to understanding data transmission, but how will this help you build a skill set for hacking? First of all, it is essential to understand this model if you hope to learn about different network protocols and TCP/IP ports. Also, terminology is often thrown around regarding a device's or protocol's function and what layer of the ASA model it belongs to. For example, MAC addresses are a layer 2 address while IP addresses are a layer 3 address. And ports, which I am sure you have heard of before, belong to layer 5. We will dig into all of these concepts shortly, but first you need to know about IP addresses so you can identify various hosts when you are hacking. IP addressing essentials. Of the fundamental concepts we are discussing in this book, IP addressing is by far the most important. But what is an IP address? Well, an IP address is a number that serves as a unique identifier that helps computers differentiate between hosts connected to their network. The most common analogy to describe this concept is that of the post system. If you wanted to mail a letter to someone, send them data, you would first need to know their home's address, IP address, before your message could be delivered. Whether you know it or not, you have undoubtedly seen IP addresses already. They consist of 4 numbers ranging from 0 to 155 that are separated by periods. As in the following example, 192.168.1.1. Also understand that an IP address is 32 bits long. We won't dig into binary math because it won't do much for our network penetration examples later in this book, but know that each number separated by a period in the address is called an octet. It is called this because each of the 4 numbers are 8 bits, 1 byte, in length. However, this IP address lacks something called a subnet mask. So we don't know what network it belongs to. Subnet masks. Each IP address is composed of 2 portions, the network portion of the address and the host portion. A subnet mask determines how much of the IP address defines a network and how much of the address identifies a host on that network. Subnet. For the remainder of this course, just note I will use the terms LAN, local area network, and subnet interchangeably. Consider the following 4 examples of subnet masks. 1. 255.0.0.0/8, 8 bits, the first octet, define the network portion of the address. 2. 255. 255.0.0/16, 16 bits, the first 2 octets, define the network portion of the address. 3. 255. 255. 255.0/24, 24 bits, the first 3 octets, define the network portion of the address. 4. 255. 255. 255. 255/32, this subnet mask indicates a host address. It does not indicate a network subnet. Note that subnet masks can be written using 2 different notations. Consider the first example. 255.0.0.0 is just another way of writing /8 because they both indicate that the first octet in the IP address, the first byte or the first 8 bits, describes the network portion of the address. Did you notice how these 4 subnet masks are in multiples of 8? That was intentional because it makes our example much easier. The truth is that there are many more complex subnet masks such as /17, 21, or 30 that lie outside the scope of this book because they require binary math. However, on private home networks such as the environment where you will be testing our demos, a 24 subnet mask is by far the most common. I'd even bet big money that your home network device uses a 24 subnet mask. That is, unless you changed it, in which case you would already know about IP subnets. So, now it's time to put 2 and 2 together. We are going to consider an IP address and a subnet mask together, determine the host and network portion of the address, and then determine the complete range of usable IP addresses for that subnet. Consider the following. IP address, 192.168.1.1. Subnet mask, 255.255.255.0. Alright, so let's chop up the IP address and define the network portion of the address. Can you work it out? When the subnet mask is applied to the IP address, we see that the first 3 octets determine the network subnet. So, 192.168.1.024 is the network on which the host with the IP address 192.168.1.1 resides. That means that the last octet determines the host portion of the address. On the 192.168.1.024 network subnet, this host is the address of 1. Furthermore, we can conclude that because each octet can range from 0 to 255, that other hosts on the 192.168.1.024 subnet can use addresses from 2 to 254. You never use the 0 or 255 address. Usable addresses on this subnet include 192.168.1.2 to 192.168.1.254. Understand that if the 192.168.1.1 host was sending data to the host using the 192.168.1.2 address. They are communicating over their LAN since they belong to the same network. Two special network addresses. So why don't we use the 0 or the 255th addresses on a subnet as host addresses? Because these two addresses are special. The first one is called the network address. This address can't be assigned to a host because it defines an entire network. In our example above, this address was 192.168.1.0. Also, note that the last address on a network subnet is the broadcast address. This address is used to send information to every host residing on that network at the same time, so this address can't be used for a single host address either. In our previous example, the broadcast address is 192.168.1.255. MAC addresses. MAC, Media Access Control, addresses are Layer 2 addresses, and they are globally unique. Each MAC address is contained on the network card of your computer, and it is composed of 12 hexadecimal digits, 09, A, B, C, D, E, F, which total 48 bits in length. The following is an example of a MAC address. B8E:6525:7E6. The first half of the address, the first 6 digits, indicate the WE organizationally unique identifier. This is just a fancy way of saying that it marks who manufactured the network card hardware in your computer. The last 6 digits are a unique identifier for that manufacturer's network cards. Because MAC addresses are Layer 2 addresses, they cannot be routed on the Internet. They belong in the data link layer of the ISA model, and they can only help devices speak to one another on the same LAN via a Layer 2 network switch. In order for Layer 2 addresses and Layer 3 addresses to operate together, we need a mechanism that binds them together. ARP, Address Resolution Protocol. ARP is a network protocol that binds Layer 2 addresses to Layer 3 addresses. Both networking devices and computers alike keep tables that record ARP information on the LAN so they can keep track of which MAC addresses are paired with which IP addresses. This information is constantly changing every time you take your laptop or mobile device to a new wireless network, and this information is critical to facilitating types of attacks such as a man-in-the-middle attack. Basically, when a host wants to send data to another computer, it has some decisions to make regarding how it will send the data. Here's how it works. The host first takes a look at its own IP address and determines if the destination host resides on the same subnet. If not, the host sends that information to its default gateway to be routed to the appropriate network. The host will look at its ARP table, find the matching entry for the default gateway, and address its data to the default gateway's MAC address. However, if the destination host is on the same subnet, all it needs to do is find the matching MAC address for the destination IP and send it directly to the intended party. If you use a Windows computer, you can use the ARP command from the command prompt to view the contents of your ARP cache. ARP is an integral part of modern networks, and there are many advanced exploits that revolve around manipulating this protocol, so you need to have a basic understanding of it. Ports and firewalls. Ports, which are also sometimes called sockets, were one of the hardest fundamental concepts for me to wrap my head around when I first started learning networking engineering and computer hacking years ago. Basically, they are numeric values that are part of the TCP/IP protocol suite that are used to tag different types of traffic. By tagging traffic, devices like firewalls can take different actions when different data streams flow through a network. There are literally thousands of different ports that are each used for different types of traffic and applications, but only a few of these are well known. Protocols. Some software developers reserve certain ports for their custom application traffic, but you only need to be concerned with the well-known ports. To get your feet wet with hacking, it is crucial that you have a basic understanding of ports, because later we will go through the process of port scanning on your local network to ascertain which of these ports are open and which are closed. The following are some of the most common ports and their respective protocols and traffic types. Port 80, HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, used for web browsing and web pages. Port 2021, FTP, File Transfer Protocol, used to download files remotely. Port 443, HTTPS, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, Secure, Encrypted HTTP. Port 22, SSH, Secure Shell, used to remotely run command line procedures. Port 53, DNS, Domain Name System, used to bind IP addresses to URLs. Port 547, DHCP Server, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, Automatic IP address assignment. As you can see, each network protocol is assigned its own unique port number. These ports provide a way to handle various types of traffic differently. For example, if I didn't want anyone to download files from a personal file server I was hosting on my network, I would block connection attempts on port 20 and 21, FTP. This is an extremely basic example, but understand that if you see a host with an open port, that host will accept connections using that specific type of traffic. As another example, consider a web server that hosts a website. It will have either port 80, HTTP, or port 443, HTTPS, open, and clients can make a connection on those ports with the server to download the web pages to their browser. These ideas bring us to the next important concept, firewalls. The term firewall is thrown around in the movies a lot, but most people don't understand what they do. Though they have many advanced features, one of a firewall's most basic functions is to permit or deny traffic to a network. Firewalls in home environments act as a single point of failure, meaning that all of the data in transit to, from the local network needs to first pass through the firewall. Because it acts as the only way into a network, the firewall can prevent hackers from making connections on specified ports to protect the local network. This concept refers to a hardware firewall, but there are software firewalls as well. For example, just consider the program adequately named Windows Firewall. It is a piece of software that will prevent the networking card in your computer from making connections on any of the ports you choose to block. We will see how to scan a target system later with a port scanner to see which ports are open and potentially exploitable. You should also know how to run a ping as well as view your IP address, subnet, mask, and MAC address. These are extremely simple commands, and they are used frequently by networking security professionals. They are all run from the command prompt, so in Windows open up the command prompt by searching for it or hitting your Windows key and typing CMD. The application's icon is a black box, and once you run this program you see a prompt with a blinking underscore. To view your IP address, subnet mask, and default gateway, just type pipconfig into the command prompt. On the other hand, if you want to see your MAC address, just type pipconfig/all into the command prompt. If you are using a Mac or Linux computer, the command is only slightly different. On these systems the command is ifconfig. In summary, please understand that we could go much deeper into these topics. In fact, there have been entire courses written about some of these subjects, but they are too advanced for a beginner and lie outside the scope of this course. The idea is to give you a working knowledge of these ideas to facilitate your hacking and penetration testing endeavors. However, if you want to further your knowledge on these concepts, it will only help you become a better hacker. Now that you know what IP addresses, MAC addresses, ports, and firewalls are, we can move on to more advanced topics.